Hopefully you all can see my screen in full screen, the deck. Right, so welcome to SAIMA session number 20. SAIMA is Salesforce Architects in the Making, and this group has been in the making for, I think, several years now. This is our 20th session, and this is focused on solution design for CTA. We are very fortunate to have two CTAs who will be talking about different aspects of solution design. And pardon my voice, like I have a really bad throat and somehow chugging along, but I'll try and make my best. I'll try and do my best to make myself audible. So if you have attended the past SAIMA sessions, the idea is this is a very unstructured, very informal group which came together to support each other in preparing for the CTA Architect Review Board and the CTA journey. The idea is to create and share content that helps others prepare for the exams. For example, solution design is one of those things. Based on this session or in general, if you have any ideas of what SAIMA could do better, please do reach out. This is not an official Salesforce group. Nothing that is being discussed in this group, either by me, by our speakers, represent Salesforce in any way. And the content is also our personal opinion as well. So just wanted to call that out. Some housekeeping rules. Please mute yourself. Ask all questions in the chat. The session flow would be, we'll have Gianluca present first. He'll talk about storytelling and key moments of truth. Then we'll have a session on design principles from Nitin. And then please do keep asking your questions on chat. After both the sessions are done, we'll have an open forum in terms of Q&A. If you want to post your question on chat, I'll collate all the questions and we'll take them towards the end. Or you can unmute and ask the questions towards the end as well. And lastly, like although this group has been around, like we claim we are not perfect, we don't know everything, and we make mistakes, and it's a part of the journey. So if you spot a mistake, please let us know and we'll try and do better the next time. And as I said, like this is a very informal group. A lot of people who have actually presented here are participants who participated earlier as an attendee and then just raised their hand that we want to help others. So we obviously welcome that, and everybody is welcome to present. With that, as I said, are very fortunate to have our two somewhat recent CTAs, Gianluca from WEG and Nitin from Deloitte. And once we are done, like we will share the slides and recordings via the meetup group. The video will also be shared on YouTube. And then we'll also keep you posted on the topics and date for the next session. If you want to be a presenter, if you want to be a host for the next session, reach out to me or anybody else within the SAIMA team and we'll make it happen. So with that, I'll actually make Gianluca the presenter. I think you should be able to present, Gianluca. Please try that.
Yeah, let me try. So I'm gonna share my screen and let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can. Let's go.
Okay, nice, very nice. Can I present myself first? So just very quickly. I'm Gianluca, and I'm based in Italy. And I'm a certified technical architect. And my journey to CTA has been amazing, very hard, but also incredible. I learned a lot from a lot of people. And this presentation today is actually the culmination of hints, of lessons from many other CTAs that were certified before me, had a lot of experience, and they helped me achieve this understanding about how the business process specifically can be understood, even if they are inserted in an unfamiliar scenario or an unfamiliar industry. And the person I want to thank the most is Vinay Sail. That is, I believe he is currently working at Accenture in the Netherlands. And he is the person that taught me very, very important concept about storytelling. But what I noticed is all those concepts were a bit ad hoc. Every different department, every different solution had a different way of doing storytelling. And I didn't really like that. I really wanted to have a formal process, a formalized way of understanding the business. And that's the reason why I created Moments of Truth. So I'm saying that because Moments of Truth is not something that exists around. If you ask a CTA, what is the moment of truth, they will not be able to tell you, because it's not a thing. I think it may become a thing maybe in the future, but it's definitely not now. But it's a thing that I used for my review board, for preparing for my review board, to be specific. And I'm also using it to coach other CTA candidates. And I see a lot of success, and that's why I'm here presenting it in general to the general public. More specifically, I think this set of slides, this presentation is intended for an audience that has a very technical background. And that is the same as me. I was born a developer in a sense. I started with JDBC, then Apex, and the full stack of Salesforce technologies. And what I noticed is, as someone that was that had a technical background, I had a lot of trouble understanding the business side, the functional side of things. I'm not really talking about governance, but really about understanding how the business works. And this set of slides is intended for that audience, because if you are like me, you will probably struggle a bit understanding how the business works and how you can tell a business story more than a technical story. And what I saw is that Moments of Truth help this kind of audience specifically. So let me start. So I'm talking about Moments of Truth. I never actually described what they are. So Moment of Truth is a term borrowed from marketing. So it represents the impression formed by customer when interacting with your products. I'll give you an example, practical example. So let's say that you are Steve Jobs and it's 2006 and you have a prototype of the iPhone in your hands, and you're asking yourself, will this be a success? Will the iPhone be something that the customers want? And how can you find out? And one thing you can do is you get a bunch of random people, you put them in a room, they sign an NDA, and then you give them a prototype. And what they will be doing is they will interact with the iPhone and say, at the end of the session, they will say, oh yes, this iPhone is great, it will have a lot of success. Maybe some people will say, oh no, I don't like this, it has no case, I prefer my BlackBerry. This will have no success, and that's fine. You, as Steve Jobs, you will collect all this feedback and understand how, if the iPhone has a chance of success or not. That is the moment of truth. The impression that every singular person had about the iPhone was the moment of truth. Each person had a different moment of truth, and sometimes it was positive or negative, but they were all moments of truth, regardless of that. And this understanding is key, because when you read a business process, and I'm talking about any business process, could be anything, that business process will have an outcome, and that outcome sometimes is achieved, sometimes is not. Every time you run a business process with a specific customer or with a specific sales rep, you hope to achieve the outcome, but sometimes you know that you will fail, and that's part of the business, it's part of the nature of things. The moment of truth is exactly that pivotal outcome. I'm saying pivotal as a way to remember that sometimes it's success and sometimes it's failure. And the best way to understand an example of a moment of truth is in the sales process. The sales process have the goal of selling, of course, and the moment of truth for the typical sales process is the opportunity closure. The opportunity closure sometimes is a closed one, sometimes is a closed lost. In a sense, it doesn't really matter. Even if you lose, it's still significant for the business. It's still telling you something. It's telling you that, the sales pipeline will have a lesser revenue at the end of the year. or it is telling you that, yeah, that the customer is not really worth having business again with, that there are a lot of consequences. It doesn't matter if it is success or not, but you hope for success, and that's how you can frame the business process. So what I'm trying to say is, you read the business process, even a new one that you, in an industry that you don't know anything about, you try to understand what is the moment of truth, so the pivotal outcome. And then based on the fact that you understand what's the outcome that is desired by the business, you'll try to frame it as a positive outcome. And you will explain how your solution is achieving the positive part. And also you can explain how an alternative solution is actually not achieving a success. It's actually causing failures. And that's how you can do storytelling. And the fact is that you can do storytelling at a very granular level, but we'll see that very soon. So let me go to the next slide. So why is this useful? Okay, I already said that it will help you understanding the business, even in unfamiliar scenarios. Even, for example, for me, non-profit scenarios were very hard. And trying to understand what was the moment of truth for each specific business process in a non-profit scenario helped me a lot. It helped me understand why the business is thinking in a certain way, what they really want, and how to achieve it. Also, moments of truth are very great candidates for KPIs, in the sense that when you achieve them, or even if you fail them, it's still great. You can create the report and show the rate of successes versus failures. And that is a great way to measure the success of your solution, to say, yes, this solution that I'm proposing in a real life project is helping the business in a very quantitative way, if you know what I mean. Then there is another great benefit. I see a lot of candidates, CTA candidates, that are providing a solution while they read requirement by requirement. So they will read the first requirement, they will tell the solution, read the second requirement, provide the solution, and so on. And of course, this is not the most effective way. You're not telling a story, you're not really showing that you are going towards a goal. And every business process has a goal. So if you identify the moment of truth, you will be able to do that. You will be able to tell a story while you read the requirements, instead of just reading them sequentially as if they were code and you were reading each line of code and you're solutioning. That's not the best way. And finally, again, about storytelling, if you identify the moment of truth and you know that the moment of truth is something you want to succeed rather than fail, you will be able to provide a happy path to show how your solution is the best solution for that, according to your assumptions, of course. So moments of truth are tremendous. They are extremely helpful, at least they were for me and for many people I'm coaching, but they are not useful for everything. I want this to be very clear that there are things where moments of truth will not help you with. So for example, moments of truth don't answer basic questions about your master data. What do I mean by that? So let's suppose that you identify in a sales process, there is a specific requirement that you can solve with the opportunity closure. So that's great. So you're using opportunity, but then that doesn't tell you, or it doesn't tell your audience what will be the products in your opportunities, right? That is an additional layer of complexity that you should consider. But moments of truth will not tell you that. The products for opportunity closure, products for an opportunity closure is something that you must think about, but it's not really about moments of truth, it's about data mastery. Also, if you're using opportunity, you may think of yourself, am I using the standard pricing or not? And if I'm using standard pricing, well, what are my price book? Are they structured by currency, by country? Again, those are basic questions, but moments of truth will not help you understanding that structure, will not give you an understanding of the master data. That is something that requires an additional analysis, a separate analysis. There is another thing that moments of truth will not help you in assessing the risks. So if you are at the customer and you want to understand how their business work, you should also analyze what are the risks that the customer is having or you expect them to have. And depending on the risk, yeah, you will be able to provide a story, but that's not a business story. That will be a more technical oriented, more solution architect oriented. So moment of truth will help you provide a business story, but if you need something different, then you should try to assess to use different tools. And for example, Nitin, he will do a presentation right after me, will provide you with more tools. Another thing that moments of truth are not good at is to provide justifications. So let's say that you identify a business requirement and you know that business requirement will require a lead conversion. How do you do that? Do you do it programmatically or manually? Moments of truth will not tell you. Will just tell you, oh, yes, a lead conversion must happen. But how you do it, that's a different story. And how you justify that, that's also a different story. So in that, use moments of truth and practice with moments of truth to help your business acumen. But if you need to improve your solution architecture, then Nitin's design principle is a better tool overall. Before I move to the next slide, I wanted to say another way to do storytelling is to use North Stars. And for example, if you identify as a risk a tight deadline, then you can elect as your North Star a concept like simplicity, being simple everywhere. That means that when you identify lead conversion, at that point, it will be easy to justify a manual lead conversion. I'll give you another example, the opposite example. So let's say that you identify as a risk for your customer the fact that there are a lot of manual errors. Then simplicity is not a great North Star. You would probably want the opposite. You will want to automatize as much as possible. And based on that North Star, your lead conversion will be programmatic, will be a screen flow. The business will follow the screen flow, and then the lead is converted automatically. That will minimize the manual errors, right? So that's an additional layer of storytelling that you can use. But North Stars, it's it's a very, very complicated and interesting topic. I'm not discussing them. I will be focusing on moments of truth, but I just want you to be aware that there are many ways of doing storytelling, and Nitin's will show you some. North Stars are also another way, but just to give you an idea. So moments of truth, how do I identify them? What are the typical moments of truth? Usually, the moment of truth will be at the end of the business process. It will be determination, because that's the goal, right? You want to achieve a goal, so it will be at the end of the business process. And usually, it will cause some kind of handover, maybe a team handover, a department handover. That's a key thing that you can use to identify if you are, if that is the moment of truth for a specific business process that you're analyzing. And this is a list of the business process that you will find in your day-to-day life. These are extremely common everywhere. So for marketing, the business process is lead qualification. And the moment of truth for lead qualification is when you convert it, right? That's the lead conversion. That's the moment true, the moment where you actually know, yes, my lead has been qualified 100%. For sales, it's about the opportunity pipeline. And the moment that is key, the moment of truth, is the closure of the opportunity. That's the moment where you know, oh yes, this opportunity has been won. I got money for my company. Or maybe the opposite. Okay, this was a dead end, but at least now I know. And again, if you look at it, lead conversion is the final act of the lead qualification process. Usually, it signals it is causing a team handover with your sales team. So you convert the lead. Now you have an opportunity. Your sales team will work on it. Maybe they will close it. Good. That's another team handover. Maybe you will create an order fulfillment process. So you will create an order, you will pass it to your operation team, and they fulfill it. maybe it's fulfilled. Now another team handover, it must be sent. Okay, so this is product delivery. It will be, the product will be packaged, it will be sent. At some point it will be delivered. Again, maybe that's another team handover. Maybe it was not delivered in time. The customer will create a case and so on. So you see, they are all connected in the end. And if you look at it in this way, it will be much easier to solution a scenario or an RFP, or in general, any customer project that you will be in. That's how I do it right now. Since I understood this concept, I use it all the time. And I'm focusing on the moments of truth on the left. I put some others on the right that are a bit less common, but they are all common in the end. So if you work in any of these, in any industry, basically, you probably saw some of them without realizing that they were moments of truth, without calling them in that way. But they are all part of business processes that are very common, and all of them usually end with one of these moments of truth. So I said before, right, that moments of truth are pivotal in the sense that sometimes they are success, sometimes they are failure. Why is this helpful? It is helpful for storytelling. What you want to say is, my solution and Salesforce are helping me achieve it, a positive outcome for each of them, for most of them at least. And a different solution or a different tool will probably achieve mostly more negative results. That's why the pivotal part is great for storytelling. This is really what you want to do if you want to tell a story to your audience. And I believe this slide is actually the most important in the full presentation, because it will give you a framing. It will let you frame every single important moment of truth, every single key moment of your business in such a way that you can tell to your audience, yes, I can achieve it. It's sometimes it's difficult to achieve it. Some other solutions are failing, but mine is able to get it right most of the time. And how do you do that? How do you use this framing? So for lead conversion, of course, you want to, the lead conversion is the end of a lead qualification process. So the outcome is a qualified lead. And the negative part is, if you don't qualify the lead, it becomes cold. That's the negative. Of course, the lead conversion is the moment to true that you want to succeed. For opportunity, of course, is closing the deal. If you don't close, you lost the sale, of course. Customer onboarding. This is something that is very important. Why? Because when you send the welcome email, if the process is not straightforward, you will lose the customer. I think that there was a statistic, I cannot find the source, but they said that 50% of your customers will stop having business with you if the first touch, if the first point of contact with you is not successful and not simple. So that means that if you're trying to send a welcome email to your customer, but the welcome email has not the correct logo, or maybe it's in the wrong language, or maybe it goes into your spam folder, all these things mean that there will be no adoption. And that's how you can frame it. Customer onboarding, the welcome email, and the single sign-on process, if you have any on top of it. They all must be right on the first try. And that's why customer onboarding is actually a very important moment of truth that can be overlooked by some young CTA candidates, some new CTA candidates. And it's the same for cases. How can you how can you achieve a negative outcome when you solve a case? If you breach the SLA, for example, that's a negative outcome. Yes, you solve the case, but you also breach the SLA. That's not nice. Instead, if you're using milestones, you can actually achieve a positive outcome and finish the case in time and make the customer happy. And it's the same for the rest of the moments of truth. This slide will allow you to understand how to frame it. And again, a story is all about the framing in that. And that's why I'm presenting it. And I believe this is really the most important slide here. So, moments of truth. Okay, now you know the most typical ones. You know why they are pivotal. Now you should mention the fact that you should capture them. And why you should? Because they're always relevant, they're always helpful. If you set your KPIs around them, you will be able to tell to the business, yes, you are actually you're actually achieving more results thanks to my solution, thanks to Salesforce. And this is very important. And it's great that you can tell to your audience, Salesforce is capturing the moments of truth out of the box, most of them actually. So if you convert a lead, yeah, you have a lead in Salesforce. It's a closed lead, but it has all the information about the lead. So it is still there. You can use it for reporting. Or you have an opportunity. Yeah, you have a pipeline report. You will see exactly in which stage it is. You will be able to find out how many you are closing. You are having a user in the portal. You will know exactly if it was able to log in. You also know how what is the language of the user, the locale. You will be able to change it. So all of this is out of the box, and it's great to tell to your customers, yes, Salesforce is able to do that, and you don't have to do anything more than open a report to find out and to track this kind of info. So most moments of truth are captured out of the box. You don't need to do anything. Some of them are exceptions. So for example, order fulfillment. In that case, you need to automate it. So just so that you know, going to the next slide, I want to provide you with an actual example, how to do storytelling for real, with an actual example. So I created this quote to cash flow. This flow has two processes, a quote flow and a cash flow, a quote process and a cash process, of course. What I'm going to do is I will show you how to not do it, how to not present it, and then how to present it. Both the bad way of presenting it and the great way of presenting it. And before I do that, so I want to say this is minimal on purpose. In real life, the business processes are huge. That's okay. The technique that I'm going to show you will work even if you have dozens of steps. It doesn't matter. You can still apply it. And it's all about framing it correctly. So quote process, cash process. So let's see how to not present them. So here I'm going to provide, to read requirement by requirement, and I will provide a solution requirement by requirement. The solution is something that works, at least to me, according to me. So just to give you an idea how most candidates will do. And I also want to do this just so to understand why this is not the most effective way, the most compelling way to present something. So quote process, sales reps call the prospects by phone. I'm going to propose a CTA solution such as high velocity sales so that they can open a lead, qualify it on the fly, convert it, and create an opportunity. Second steps, the quotes must be authorized by the manager. Okay, we'll configure an approval process on the opportunity. The managers will be able to look at it, approve it, and signal that the sales reps can continue the process. Then the third step is the prospect sign the quotes online. In order to do so, I'm recommending an electronic signature application such as DocuSign that will allow the sales reps to send the quote so that the customers can open an email, see the quote, and sign it online. Following with the next process, cash process, customers can pay by using some portal. I'm recommending to use a customer community and orders. The customers can open the order page or place an order from there. Next step is a link with instructions is sent by email. So when an order is placed, I will create a flow so that record trigger flow that will send an email template to the customer with the instructions. Finally, secure phone collects the credit card info. In order to do so securely, I recommend a payment application such as Chargent. Chargent will take care of collecting the credit card info and pay and do the payment and collect the payment. So this is my solution. What I did is I read it line by line and I provided the solution line by line. If you like it, that's good, but I made actually many mistakes. One of them is I never justified my solutions. I just recommended them without justifying them. I never considered alternatives. So this is probably the worst thing I did, but there is more. I didn't tell any story. So what can we do to tell a story? First, I will recognize a goal for each process. So for the second process, the goal is simple, is a payment. So this is a money transaction, that's the goal. And for the first one is a bit more tricky, but you see here, the goal here is not really to propose a quote, but to let the customer sign the quote. When you sign a quote, you're basically signing a contract. So the goal for my quote process is actually contract generation. So moving on to the next slide. Now that I have a goal, and what I want to do is to explain how I can achieve the goal, how I can get a happy outcome based on my solution for each of these. So for the quote process, the goal is contract activation. I'm aligning the terminology to Salesforce, but this is just a framing. This could be an opportunity closure. This could be contract signature. It doesn't matter how you mention it. The fact is that you're using this as a framing. So any other goal is fine, but I'm aligning my terminology with Salesforce. So this is contract activation. And for the cash process, the goal is money transaction. And of course, what I want to achieve is that at the end, my solution will have a happy outcome. I have achieved my goal and the payment was successful. And then how can I use these? Sorry. Now I identified the moments of truth. Moment of truth here is contract activation. The other moment of truth here is money transaction. How can I use this effectively to tell a story? Like this. First, I state my goal. Then for each requirement, I'll remind the goal. So you see here, I will repeat contract because that's my goal. Again, here I will repeat agreements. That's a synonym. Again, activate the contract. That's the third goal. By doing that, I will build momentum. I'm actually telling to my audience, yes, my solution is there for a goal, to achieve a goal. And then when I read all these, I will discuss that I achieved it happily. I will explicitly say that, yes, I achieved a happy outcome thanks to my solution. Then I will focus on the fact that this process is over, but it was a process that introduced a second process. So I will focus on the transition and mention the second process and the goal for the second process. Then I will do the same. I will build momentum. And finally, I will again focus on the fact that I achieved a happy outcome thanks to my solution and thanks to Salesforce. So let me read it for you now. And remember how I read it initially. Now consider how I read it this time. So I'm solutioning the quote process. I identified the goal as the goal of this process, a contract activation. So the first step is the sales reps will call the prospects by phone. I will be using high velocity sales to achieve this. High velocity sales is a solution can be used to propose contracts and to qualify the prospects on the fly and create an opportunity. Second step is the quotes must be authorized by the manager. In order to do so, I will be using an approval process on the opportunity so that the managers can check the quote and avoid such a thing as creating a risk agreement. The third step is the prospects sign the quotes online. In order to do so, I recommend using solutions, an app exchange solution such as Chargent. Chargent will be able to detect the signature and activate the contract into Salesforce. At the end of this process, I will have a happily signed contract into Salesforce, and that will end the process. Now that I completed the quote process, I will follow with the quote to cash process, so the cash part of the process. And the goal of the cash process is actually to complete the money transaction. How can I do that? First step is the customer can pay by using some portal. I'm recommending a customer community, and when the customers can place an order, they will be able to find the due amount so that they can use, they know how much they can pay. A link with instructions will be sent by email. I'm recommending to use a record trigger flow. The email will contain instructions about how to pay. And then a secure form will collect the credit card info. I'm recommending Chargent as an app exchange solution, because Chargent will be able to enforce compliance over the payment process. By using these steps, I will be able to guide the customers toward the payment, and I will have a payment, a successful payment in Salesforce. The out-of-the-box Salesforce tools, such as approval processes, customers communities, or opportunities, has helped me achieving a successful quote-to-cash flow. So I hope that you like the second version best. I hope that you like this version best. Of course, I still made mistakes. I still didn't justify my solutions. I still didn't recommend alternatives. I didn't consider alternatives. I didn't discuss why I discarded alternatives. Even more can be done. But I want to give you this. I was able to do storytelling. I didn't read the requirements by one. I provided a sense of flow into my reading. And I think, I believe most of you will agree with that. And moments of truth are the way to do so. Okay, so next slide. What is the moment of truth? So what I recommend is, when you read, for example, an RFP, try to see if you missed any moment, if you can find all the moments of truth. For example, if you see prospects and you want to model prospects as leads, then you should ask yourself, okay, the leads usually are converted. What is the point in time where I convert my lead? It's a basic question. It's a moment of truth question, and you should ask yourself that. If you use a customer community, then you should ask yourself, okay, but where is in practice my customer onboarded? Because it doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen automatically. It's a decision. You must make some assumptions and decide where this is going to happen. And based on this, let me go back to the previous examples. So this one here. If you see, I'm actually using a community. I'm recommending it as a solution. But in my initial solutioning, I didn't even consider the problem. How is a customer user onboarded? I mean, I'm recommending the community without considering that they do not appear in the community. They must be onboarded. And here, let me try to fill the gap. Moments of truth are good for that, also to fill gaps. So I understand now that I missed the moment of truth. Where do I make it happen? Where do I onboard my customers? Maybe here in the first step, when the sales reps call the prospects, probably not. I'll make an assumption here. You don't want prospects to be on the community. You only want customers. It's a very sound assumption. So not here. So maybe the other one, quotes must be authorized by the manager. No, because until a quote is approved, that is still a prospect, not a customer. Then maybe when the prospect send the quote online, yeah, that's a great moment. And if you remember, I recommended DocuSign. DocuSign can capture the signature, and it can start an automation so that the customer is onboarded automatically. That is a very valid way of providing a solution to this, and it will fill a gap that I wasn't aware I introduced when I recommended the community. So moments of truth are very good for that. They help you identifying gaps in your own solution. And that's why I recommend that you read this slide here and you try to recognize in your day-to-day life, as an architect, when this is happening, when all of these moments are happening in your business processes. Okay, so this slide, okay, I was discussing lead conversions, customer onboarding. If the scenario has an ERP, it's used for order fulfillment, of course, that's the moment true. But let's say that your orders are generated in Salesforce, as it was in my example. So you want customers in the community, and they are self-servicing. They are automatically placing orders. They're manually placing orders. So the problem is the orders are in Salesforce. The ERP is not in Salesforce. So how do you achieve order fulfillment? So that is something that will probably require integration. It happened to me that the customers were not thinking about integrations. They were discussing the processes in a very high level. But by using moments of truth, I was able to say, okay, this requires an integration, because yeah, if you really want to fulfill those orders, you need to connect those two sources together, the community and the ERP. And that's something I recommend that you do. So if you have a community where you place orders, consider answer yourself the question, what is my order fulfilled? And then do the same if you have assets, of course. If you have assets, consider when the asset is generated in Salesforce, what is the system of records for assets, and how is it updated so that it is staying in sync with the system of record. Did I forget something? This is not a question for me. It's a question for you. So I hope I convince you to use moments of truth and to rememorize the important ones, the typical ones. Let's say that you recognize that a lead conversion in the business process. What should you do? Try to elaborate some considerations. For example, is the lead generated with web to lead, or maybe marketing cloud, or digital engagement? Maybe you need to make an assumption so that you can propose one way to generate it. Are you working with Europe? Then probably you need to be compliant with GDPR. You need a consent management tool. Maybe you should introduce individual object. It's a consideration to apply when you have a lead conversion, when you identify a lead conversion in your scenario or in your day-to-day life. It's the same for opportunity closure. When you have an opportunity where you identify that as a moment of truth, which products will you have in the opportunity? Will you be using CPQ, standard pricing? Is quote a thing? Do you need to forecast? Territory management? Those are all considerations that come, it's part of the package, this specific moment of truth. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because you have a way to identify gaps in your solutioning simply by memorizing that some specific moments of truth have multiple considerations available, multiple considerations that you must elaborate. Customer onboarding, for example, will force you to consider the locales, the devices, Android or iPhone. It will force you to consider user duplicates. That's for CMS. Case resolution will force you to consider milestone, service contracts. I'm not saying that you will need to use milestones all the times, but you will know when you recognize the case resolution that you should ask yourself the question: do you want to use entitlements? Which assumptions do you need to make to use entitlements? It's something that parts of the baggage and will help you identify gaps. Same for order fulfillment and for product delivery. So I'm going to the next slide. Help, I cannot find the mode. This is the last slide of my presentation, so I'm almost there. What happens if you're reading a scenario, or you are replying to an RFP for a real project, and you see that it's a very, very atypical scenario or a very, very atypical industry for your customer? What do you do? What do you do if you're not able to understand what the moments of truth for your business processes? Then what I recommend is that you improvise a moment of truth, right? Any moment of truth. It's okay. You can be creative. You can invent it. As long as you find a goal for a business process, as long as you can understand why sometimes the goal is not achieved, the pivotal part that sometimes is positive, sometimes is negative, then you're done. Because moments of truth are just a framing. They are not the full story. It's just a way that you frame the business process so that you can tell a story or you can understand the gaps in your solution. So the fact is, it's very common that you, in your life, that you will see something that is totally atypical, and it will happen that you will need to invent a moment of truth by thinking on your feet, on the spot sometimes. So I'll give you an example. I had a customer, and this customer was complaining about invoices. So the invoices were sent by Salesforce. I believe they were using Financial Force. So they had these invoices that were sent to the customers, but sometimes they were not sent, or maybe they were sent with a strong delay. It was a huge problem. So what did I do? I decided to solve this from a governance perspective first, and then from a technical perspective second. So governance perspective is I discuss a business process. I discussed a business process for invoice posting and explicitly declared the moment of truth as the invoice posting. That was my moment of truth. Something very atypical that only worked for that project and that customer, but it was good enough. It's just that by framing the discussion this way, I could help the business understanding the steps of the process that were important for them to minimize the problem. And the problem was the missing invoices. And I was also able to help the customer train the people. Also, we were able to provide the status on the invoice so that you could see clearly what was the current stage of the invoice. We created the logging framework. Every time there was a failure, you could see it, we could log it. And based on the framework, we could set reports, KPIs, so that the managers could see if this was happening, was keeping happening, or there was some positive feedback out of this discussion. And then when there were huge delays, we were sending automatic notifications. So I approached this both governance side with the business process and technical side. And the customer was happy. I can tell you the customer was happy. So moments of truth, they help me in this CTA journey and also in my life. They help a lot of the candidates I coach, especially the ones with a technical background that do not really fully grasp the business side of things. And I hope this will also help you. So thanks all, and use mods for good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gianluca. This was very, very enlightening. I think I was just looking at some of the things that you highlighted, and I think this is a great tip. And there are a number of questions, but as I said earlier, like we will take all the questions towards the end. So from Gianluca and Moments of Truth, we'll now move to Nitin and design principles that should help you in your review board. So Nitin, if you want to share your screen, you can get started.
Yeah. Hopefully my screen is visible. So a little bit about myself. My name is Nitin, and I work as a technical architect with Deloitte. I come from a completely different background. I come from a business analyst and turned into a technical architect over the course of the last 10 years. And today I'm going to talk about the design principles, which actually help me in understanding how I can justify my storytelling, how I can predict why, and how I can prepare a solution within given time frame. So a little bit of a story behind design principles. So during my preparation time, I was usually struggle with what is a why in a CTA, and there's a consistency between two different solutions. So if I attempt a case study, let's say 3 different times, I'll always land up with 3 different type of solutions. And at the time, I had a conversation with my enterprise architect on one of my projects, and he said, hey, when you start a project, usually you lay down some design principles and you always validate your solution against these design principles. Why don't you think about using this concept in your preparation? And that's where I started using design principles in my preparation, in my coaching sessions and so on. So what does it actually represents? So if you look at it, it's just the set of some considerations which you validate your solution against with. Why you need to consider them. Like, in my view, they can be very useful in your projects as well as in your CTA journey, because you can always validate your ideas against these design principles. And if you're violating it or you're creating any exceptions, you need to have a solid reasoning behind it. They now they not only help you reducing the time, preparation time, but they also help you telling a story if you stuck to it. For instance, you cannot say, I'm going to use declarative over programmatic as my design principle, and then start solving everything through Apex in your solution. So they help you in basically validating your solutions. I'm going to talk more about it in my coming slides. Now, the last point is they can be used as a why in your Q&A, because you can always say that, hey, this is my design principle and I'm sticking to it, and going by this, I'm actually proposing so and so on. But you need to be careful how you arrive at those design principles for doing so. Now, in my understanding, they are like pillars for the house in a continuously shifting ground. If you look at a CTA case study, you'll always find it that if you touch, and let's say, your data model, you have implications on your security and so on. So these principles actually act as a pillar when you look at from a 3,600 feet. Now, how I derive them. So usually I used to derive them from my case studies or some best practices or based on my assumptions. I'm going to talk about them, how I used to do it and how you can do it. In case you want to go into detail and then see what is design principles and what good standards looks like, there are thousands of examples available in this site, which is called principles.design. Now, let's move on to the design principles. I'll highly encourage audience to participate here. I'm going to post some questions now and then. So please help me in with this discussion. So first of all, the very common design principle where we say buy over build. And why you wanted to stick to this design principle? Because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. If something has been already developed and which doesn't change across projects, why you wanted to actually develop it. Also, it increases your speed to the market. Very common design principle, but the way I've seen in the presentations is they always talks about, oh, my assumption is buy versus build. Why? I mean, why you wanted to talk about buy versus build? I mean, you're not going to create any comparisons there, right? It's a design principle. It's your assumption where you're saying that, hey, my solution is underpinning this design principle where I'm saying buy over build, and I'm going to use app exchange packages for it. You can just a change of word versus to over can actually help you. Now, with this design principle, you can actually justify the use for app exchange packages like DocuGen or Ponga for document generation, DocuSign or SSign for your document e-signing solution, and so on. But make sure that you're not overusing this principle. I mean, if you have a buy over build, that doesn't mean that you're going to create, you're going to propose app exchange package for everything, because you need to understand that when you're actually proposing an app exchange package, there's a downside to it. There's a downside in terms of learning cost. Your developer have to learn that package before implementing it. You have to think about their distribution mechanism. There can be a chance where the the App Exchange package is actually taking some data away from Salesforce and processing it. So you need to think about all those considerations before overusing this principle. You also think about the upgrade process, which is most of the time in real-time projects, we forget about it. So if I propose, for instance, a roll-up helper, it's a very good package which can roll up the numbers even from a lookup relationship. But there's a very painful upgrade process because these guys never tell you, for instance, when the new package will be released and so on. So be careful about this particular number one design principle. Now let's talk about optimize application utilization. I was just following up the chat, and there were many questions around: do I need to consider the budget when I'm actually proposing a solution in CTA? Do I have to take care of licensing cost and so on? Of course, I mean, you don't have to, but that doesn't mean that you use your creativity to show your carelessness. In my view, assuming that you have an unlimited budget is a mistake in a CTA, because CTA is not about proposing all the Salesforce products. It's more about making sure that you have an optimized solution. I'll give you a few examples here. For instance, there are some scheduling problem, and then suddenly people will start proposing FSL. And then they will say, okay, hey, this is buy over build concept. But think about it. I mean, FSL is not just scheduling. It has more features like inventory management, asset management, your routing, your mobile app. Are you making use of all those features? Most probably yes, probably no. So you have to think about optimization of applications. Let me give you another example. There is let's imagine there's a payment gateway, which they have clearly defined in the case study that it is only providing SOAP API or REST API. And suddenly you saw a payment gateway, and you know that there's an easy solution out, which is hosted payment gateway. For those who don't understand, hosted payment gateway is more like your page is hosted on the application, and then you redirect user to make a payment on it. Think about it. Are you optimizing the application here? In my view, no, because in the case study, it's clearly defined that the application only supports SOAP API, but you have used your creative liberty here to just say, oh, hey, there's an in-house application, so I can actually create a UI on top of it and host a hosted payment gateway on top of it. So my view here, don't assume that you have an unlimited budget and you can do whatever you want in order to achieve the goals of the project. Always ensure that you have to work within the boundaries and then make maximum use of the application or applications written in your case study. You're not going to just retire some application because it has a better solution on Salesforce. You also always have to think about, is there any problem with that particular application? I mean, what benefit I'm going to get out of by retiring that application? My third principle, which is one community. So most of the time I used to suggest one community in my solutions because it makes my job easy in terms of maintenance. But I do understand there are two schools of thoughts on this particular principle, and it's very subject to challenge. Many people are of opinion that there should be, if there are customers and let's say partners, they should have their own community. There's a very good article on this particular topic. I forgot to link it here, but I'll link it later, which actually describes that why you need two communities, under what circumstances you're going to need it. Let's talk about the next design principle, which is declarative over programmatic. And again, in my view, most of the time, people make a mistake here where they start comparing these two and then they talk about configuration versus customization. There's another version of this design principle which sticks to configuration over customization. I have chosen these two words, declarative or programmatic, because they align with the vocabulary of a CTA guide. Now, why you want to do it? You want to do it because you want to implement best practices. You want to increase speed to market. It's easily maintainable, and then because it's a low code. Now, this is a very good example where I've seen people using declarative over programmatic or configuration over customization. And then they say, okay, this is my assumption. And then they'll start using Apex or batch processes or probably custom API development within Salesforce to solve the solution or to solve the problem. In my view, storytelling is all about connecting the dots and sticking to one statement and resonating it in your different artifacts or in your different solution. So if you're talking about I'm going with the declarative or programmatic, make sure that you validate your solution and then say, okay, hey, I'm using the elements of flows, team, external services, and so on, wherever I'm trying to address a problem. Next one is an interesting one. This is around the files. And in my understanding, most of us, what we do is like, as soon as we look at some PDF or file generation, we start calculating that what will be the impact of it on a file storage. In my view, you don't have to bring everything into Salesforce. Again, this is subject to challenge because what I've seen is that people say that, okay, I can go for additional storage, especially the file storage within Salesforce. Now, as per my understanding, there are two types of files. One which can be generated on the fly, like your invoices, because you have the underlying data within Salesforce or an external system. So you need a document generator which can pick this data and then generate a file for you and then distribute it to the customer or whosoever need that file. The second is there are files which are needed for audit purpose, or there are files which are needed for your which are needed basically on a regular basis, like your product brochures and so on. So in my design principle, in my head, I always used to distinguish between the two and always make sure that when I'm actually calculating my file storage, I'm not counting the files which I can generate on the fly using a document generator. Why? Because I want to make sure that I'm optimizing the file storage in Salesforce. Clear-cut examples which you can pick from case studies which are publicly available are invoices, your let's say codes to a certain extent, or anything which needs to be downloaded on request by customer. Now, moving on, there's another one which is very commonly used. We talk about event-driven architecture, and when you look at it, you can actually use it to justify your declarative or programmatic principle. So if you look at it, most of the time, your ESB, whether you talk about Boomi or you talk about MuleSoft or any other middleware, they always have the connectors with them. These connectors can be used for declarative programming. And so if you're going with the event-driven architecture and you're using connectors, you're basically not only using this principle within Salesforce, but even outside Salesforce. Common mistakes which I have seen again, people talk about the event-driven architecture, but when you look at it, they're using outbound messaging or some other mechanism to go with the fire and forget pattern. Going back to the point which I was emphasizing in the last slide, please make sure that if you're using design principle, you use it for storytelling, you correlate your solution against, basically correlate your artifacts against it. The next one is again tie back to the first one. It talks about decoupling the architecture. Again, my point is don't use it for the sake of using it. Make sure that you validate your solution against it. You're not having point-to-point connections, and if in case you're having it in your solution, make sure that you have a proper reasoning for them. Next one is a very interesting one. It says don't bring information in Salesforce if there's no business process around it. This concept comes in from the data minimization. There are many benefits of adhering to this design principle. For instance, you can keep your data model clean. If you have a less data in Salesforce, you don't have to worry about the concepts like LDV for it. You don't have to worry about concepts like who's going to own this data and so on. Also, why you're going to use this? Because first of all, it's a best practice. GDPR and other regulations always talks about collecting minimum data in Salesforce or for say any other application. So you're sticking to these, and that's where you're trying to make your life easy in your board as well as in your real-time projects. This particular principle, what I've seen is, especially in the real-time projects, people bring in data into Salesforce just for reporting, which is, in my view, is not correct. I mean, why you want to bring in something into Salesforce which has no implication on process? Okay, moving on to the next one. Basically, I've already covered it. Now, reporting one. Cross-platform reporting should be from external tools like CRM analytics. So this principle is always from our point of view, future scalability. This also ties back to the other two principles which I've already discussed around data model. So, but there's a caveat to it. You have a cross-platform reporting, don't directly suggest CRM analytics. Always keep an eye if you have a reporting tool within your system landscape. Sometimes you might have in your real projects talking about Power BI. And as an architect, you don't want to land up in a debate where say, okay, Power BI versus CRM analytics. Because if you look at it from an enterprise point of view, they will always want to unify the tools. Every system will have a particular role to play in the system landscape. And if you already have a Power BI, why you wanted to go with the CRM analytics? Think about it. In my real-time projects, I've seen both CRM analytics and Power BI being used, but we had solid justification for it. Now, this is the most important one when you're actually doing data modeling. One lead will result in one opportunity. Can somebody tell me why? Why so? Why you want to stick to this principle? When I say one lead results in one opportunity.
Feel free to unmute, or you can type it in the chat, whatever is easier. Or raise your hand.
Sai here. I would like to take that. So an opportunity can have multiple products, right? And we can tag in all the products that we can sell to one opportunity. In most business, one opportunity makes sense. It's just different products that gets added and can be sold in one opportunity.
Okay. What? What else? I mean, any different thoughts?
There are some inputs in the chat as well, like avoid duplicates, to focus more on the opportunity instead of tracking different opportunities. Atul, you want to say something?
Yeah, Nitin. Yeah, Gaurav. So probably if we have a single opportunity, a single lead for per opportunity, then that will allow us to find the influence of the particular campaign. If we associate it with multiple opportunities, then we'll lose that data or will not be able to effectively find out the campaign which are actually impacting the business or creating positive impact in the business.
I mean, I agree with everyone here, but when I thought about this design principles to keep myself in check, the idea was that in case your one lead results in multiple opportunities, think about what is a lead. Lead is an interest shown by a customer, and it's a early sign off that you can sell something to this customer. Once a lead matures and you convert it into an account, contact, and opportunity, if one lead is resulting into multiple opportunities, this particular lead most of the time have shown interest he's going to basically buy X amount of products from you. So for a sales rep, it's always going to be one opportunity which is actually resulting into actual sale. Think from this point of view, opportunity is always your long sales cycle. So it can move, it can be active between 2 different quarters. And if one lead is resulting into 3 different opportunities for say, that means there's a good chances that one sales rep is actually playing around with the numbers, and this can have an impact on their forecasting, because ultimately I'm going to buy only one product. Let's take an example here. I want to buy a car, and I raise an inquiry with a dealer who sells various models from Mercedes. My requirement is I'm going to buy only one car. But if the salesperson converts this into 3 different opportunities, saying that I have shown this customer Mercedes A-Class, S-Class, or something else, and think about from this point of view, I'm only going to buy one car. I'm not going to buy 3 cars. So there's a good chances that the 2 opportunities will result into a closed lost. But for a brief period, the forecasting for that particular sales rep has gone up. So it can actually mess up with your forecasting numbers. So that was the primary reason I decided to go with this principle, where I said, okay, I'm going to carefully design my lead in such a way that it shows one particular interest, and it always gets converted into one opportunity. Again, this is my principle. It's subject to be challenged, and it might not work in all 100 different cases. Okay, let's move on to in the interest of time, let's move on to the next one. Always check one-to-one cardinality. There's a good chances that you're creating an object unnecessary. So if you have a one-to-one cardinality from a functional, then always make sure that you're double checking it. There's a good chances that you don't need that extra object. If you really need that object, make sure that you have a clear-cut reasoning behind it, why you want a different object. Is there a different life cycle? If there is a different security requirement around it? Because this is one of the question which will be asked definitely in your board, the Q&A. Next one is around identify or differentiate between asset, inventory, and product. This is a very crucial concept. I'll briefly touch upon it. Let's take a quick view from the audience here. What do you feel? What is a product? Let me give you an example. I want to book a hotel room, and you're designing a system for let's say Redison. So what is the product for Redison? what is their asset and what is their inventory. Any thoughts?
So product is the room. The inventory is the number of days. Like for example, if they want to open, if they want to sell that room for like next year, then the all 365 days become the inventory. And I don't think asset would fit in here, but asset are generally like something that we sell to the customer. So maybe maybe if we are kind of giving a car rent for a let's say 1 month to the customer, then that would become an asset for the customer that will that can be up. But then in the room scenario, I don't see asset requirement.
Okay. How are you going to model the product here? Think about it. If you say rooms are my products, so I have 2 hotels with Radisson, one in London, another one in Dubai, the third one in Mumbai. So I'm going to model each of these rooms as products.
So if all the 3 locations have the exact same room specification, then yes. If they have a different specification, let's say suite, deluxe, standard, and things like that, then I will like create a different entries for them. But each room for me is a one product.
And what will be your, so each room between, let's say I have 100 rooms in my Dubai branch and 200 rooms in Mumbai. So I'm going to model basically 200 plus 100, 300 rooms.
300 rows, yes. Yes.
Okay. And unfortunately, that's a difficult model to justify. That's where you're mixing up, in my view, product with inventory. So if you look at it now, if I have to go and create another hotel, I have to add another list of products to it. And with the product, you also have to not only create product records, but you also have to create the price book. You also have to create the price book entries along with it. Let me quickly touch upon what I mean by asset, what I mean by inventory, and what I mean by product, and then I'll correlate it with this example. So for me, asset is something which is owned by customer, and they are owning it in a long term. So for example, if I am buying a house, I can create it as an asset. But if I am renting a car for 3 days, I'm not going to capture this as an asset for a customer because it's just renting. I'm not going to own that particular car. Let's talk about product. So in my understanding, product is something which is consistent. It's something which doesn't change over time or doesn't change too frequently. Inventory is something which is basically I'll say, which basically comes basically count of this product, an instance of this product, which I'm going to actually rent or which I'm going to basically sell to my customer. Let's take now let's implement this into the hotel scenario. If I am implementing, I'm going to probably implement room types as my products. And then actual rooms as my inventory. So I'll say, okay, I have a particular 200 rooms, which are classified as 15 class A, 15 class B, 15 class D, and so on. and I'm going to basically link it with my product. So there will be a lookup going from my inventory, probably, which will be, I'll name as room as a custom object, and I'll link it to my product. And then I'll say, okay, this room, a particular room is present in where? So maybe another object somewhere which will represent my location of my hotel and its attributes. And I'll say, okay, these rooms are in this particular hotel. Now, when a user, basically a customer is booking those hotels, I'll create an order saying that this customer has booked in so and so type of room in so and so type of hotel. I'll not be allocating my inventory to it because I don't know at the moment, probably 101 will be free or 105 will be free. But I definitely know at that moment that yes, I will be having X number of hotels rooms free on 25th of January, for say. So when you're designing your solutions, please be clear what is your asset, what is your inventory, what is your product. If you don't clearly distinguish between the three, there's a good chances that you're going to screw up with your solution, and then you will find hard to justify in your Q&A. I can go on and on with this, but in the interest of time, I'll just move on. Mobile first design. So this is mostly useful in the real time projects. You need to think about future scalability of your solution. If you're talking about that you're going to have a Salesforce mobile app rollout or a mobile publisher rollout in future, always think about your LWC designs. Always make sure that you have a UX person involved who can actually lay down these designs for mobile first and then followed by desktop. Also think about if you're going with this design principle which says mobile first design, you also have to keep your QA team in touch. Finally, on this slide, we have a never use LWC with sharing mode, or sorry, without sharing mode to bypass the record level sharing. This is again subject to challenge. I used to stick to this principle in order to make sure that my security model is perfect, or basically not flawed one. And I'm not getting this question that why are you using without sharing mode to bypass security? I know this has some cost implications because sometimes there's a good chances that you have a customer with the CC licenses, which you have to promote it to CC plus licenses, and just to stick to this principle. In real-time projects, in case you're violating this principle, always make sure that you have a good security testing done on your LWC components. And you document it so that you don't have to answer security team later on. There are some other principles, examples here, like idempotency in the integrations. This definitely gives you clarity and that why you wanted to use, and then your integration, if fails, this is not causing any problems for you. This is mostly used in the real-time projects, and especially while designing the endpoints on ESB layer. It can also, in some cases, can be used in Salesforce when you're developing the custom APIs. Now, the next one is defining the ownership in governance, data model, and processes. So we usually define the ownership in data models, where we say that who's going to own which records. But in my understanding, you also have to define the ownership in your governance. So when you define your governance slide, or when you in your projects, when you're define, let's say you're starting a new project, then you also have to define who's going to own what. Don't skip that process. In case you're skipping it, you're actually creating a rabbit hole for yourself, in my view. So always define ownership, who's going to do what, where you need to go if you have a problems. The last one is again around the project. So define KPI for measuring success. You always have to measure it. You always have to justify why are you doing something. So if you define the project KPIs starting from your day one in the project, it always helps you. Just a quick snippet how I used to actually use the design principles in my CTA presentations. So I always used to have in my first page along with the assumptions, and I always used to call it out. These are my pillars underpinning my solution. For instance, buy over build, declarative or programmatic, and event driven and decoupled architecture. I think this is this is a slide from my universal safety solution. And what I used to do is I keep on referring to these design principles, which I've announced in my slide number 1 throughout my solution. So this used to help me with the storytelling, because in my view, storytelling is again connecting various dots and sticking to one principles. So with this, I'd like to close my presentation. Back to Gaurav.
Thanks, Nitin. Absolutely fantastic insights. Okay, and then we have a lot of questions in the chat. But as I mentioned earlier, if anyone wants to unmute and ask, they can do that. I'll go in the order in which we received the questions. The first one was from Mangesh, and this is to both of you, Gianluca and Nitin, whoever wants to take it. Are CTA candidates supposed to list the KPIs of business and how the technical solution can improve it? For example, case deflection to reduce number of calls and so on and so forth. What are the other business indicators you can bring up in a generic way? That was the first question.
So if the question is, should I do it as a CTA candidate? Yeah, but if you keep it on a general level, I think that's okay. You don't need to be, unless you've been asked during the Q&A, I don't think you really need to go into detail which KPI to track what and in which way. That's my opinion, of course.
In my view, this ties back to the concept of North Star, Gianluca, which you're talking about. So basically, you don't have to list them explicitly, but implicitly, you still have to think about it. You need to think about that your solution is actually addressing the problems. So for instance, if they are highlighting in the paragraph, I'm talking about the CTA journey here, not the actual projects. Let me clarify myself. So if your case study is, for instance, talking about that they have a disconnected systems, manual processes, so you have to address those. So you have to think about how you can make their life easy by bringing in automation. Again, going back to my point of connecting the dots. So if you're talking about that, hey, this is your problem, and if I'm presenting in my system landscape saying that I am going to propose automatic provisioning and deprovisioning of users, so that makes sense, right? Suddenly, because they have highlighted that manual processes are their problem, and now you're trying to address it. So this is in my view, this is solving implicit requirements.
Yeah, agreed. Next one is, I just posted in the chat again because it's a slightly longer question. What Sridhar is asking is, do I need to come up with the solution based on cost as the criteria to elaborate how much I can spend on licenses, how much on building the solution, and how much to maintain? The reason being, no one talks about the complete cost associated with solution, but customer may not have so much budget. If I suggest a costly solution, it may add on many licenses. I think usually we make an assumption in terms of cost, but I'll let you both clarify what is your take on how it should be handled. Whoever wants to go first.
Nitin, you can go first.
Okay, so as I mentioned in my during my presentation, the cost is not one of the factors which you need to bother about, but don't use your creative liberty to just run away with it. So be logical in your solution and then always have why you are actually suggesting it. For instance, the examples which I gave, FSL, I mean, always ask a question, why are you proposing it? Don't shut down a system because somebody, because it makes your life easy in terms of solution. Rather think about, think about shutting down a system also involves a cost. And then bringing that functionality into Salesforce, you're actually creating a, again, rabbit hole for yourself, because now there will be a direct question. Customer doesn't never say that there is a problem with this particular system, and then you're using your creative liberty to just shut it down. I can't think of any example here. Gianluca, probably you can share your thoughts, and if I remember the example, I can quote it from case studies.
I agree with you, Nitin. I agree with you. I wanted to approach the question from a different perspective too. And the perspective is practical. And when you're a business, the way things cost is different than for people, for consumers, in the sense that you always have a way to negotiate. So what seems like a crazy expense may not be crazy in practice, because if you have a good procurement team, they will be able to negotiate and find something favorable to you. So it is true that cost is a factor. But if you think, oh, wait, I cannot propose 1,000 license of this because it's too expensive, maybe not. Maybe that's not true in practice. Of course, you should not do it freely. You should mention it probably. And maybe you should mention, I'm confident that this could be a factor for the solutioning, and maybe in Q&A they can go back to you and maybe ask for alternatives. But I don't think that cost works in the same way as for consumers, for enterprises. So in a sense, I think the question is looking at it from a point of view that is not the practical point of view in terms of how businesses work.
Yeah, agreed. I think there are a lot of questions. So I think we should move on to the next one. So another question is from Natarajan. Should we recommend more than one solution for a problem and justify why we do that, or should we usually go with one solution?
Okay, maybe we can do.
Good question.
Me? Okay, then my point of view is this. You, as a technical architect, you are an advisor. An advisor will tell you an advice, a recommendation. It doesn't mean that there is only one way of doing things. But yeah, you need to provide one recommendation. That's my point of view. Otherwise, you don't understand technical architects. Technical architects are advisors. They are not technical people. They're not developers. That's very key to me. So I have a very, very strong opinion about it. Nitin, please.
I do agree with you, Gianluca. So I don't remember who told me, but he told me you've been given 3 hours to basically propose a solution and then justify it. So you can you of course, I mean, you have to talk about at some places what were the considerations you have taken, but not at every place. So it's all boils down to the concept of, I think I was discussing it with Sam a few days back, the information density. You have a 45 minutes to present. So it's up to you where you feel, yes, this is the right place where I need to talk about alternatives, and then justify my solution, why I've chosen it. But always remember that in max of the cases, you have to talk about why. If you're missing why, then there's a sure shot you're not going to pass this exam.
Yeah,
because ultimately the point is those 3 hours have been given to you to basically propose a solution, and then the Q&A is all about basically providing justification that why you and how you have arrived at that solution. So the options becomes a part of it.
Absolutely. And I think Sam has also been providing a lot of good answers in the chat. Sam, I think you're on the call. So if you want to unmute and just share your perspective with the audience, I think that will be very helpful.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go for it.
Oh, excellent. Is it clear enough?
It's fine. We can get on with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so, my view is that, just going back to the previous one, the one about cost, it comes up every time, right? And ultimately, you've got to remember that, the role of the CTA is to be able to assure C-level leadership team members, so CTOs, CIOs, COOs, that you have thought out the solution, its impact, and the considerations well enough so that what you're proposing is a solution that will be successfully meeting the business goals. It's providing performance, it's providing scalability, it's providing long-term value to the business, right? That's the purpose of the CTA, and that involves the breadth, and you're looking across the whole thing, in multiple domains, but also extends down to the deep level. We always talk about T-shaped people in breadth and depth, but if you start there, then you can understand why cost is a factor, absolutely, but it's not a driving factor. Okay, that's my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is great advice. Next, Ankit asked about what is idempotency. So Ankit, you brought this up term in your slides. Maybe you want to explain it.
So idempotency is a concept which says that every time with the same input, if I share it with the process or a function, it always returns me the same output. So it should not, it becomes very important with respect to the integrations because they can fail anytime. It also is a concept which is described in your enterprise architect patterns for Salesforce. There's a very good video on YouTube about it. In short, it's a concept where it says, okay, I have a function or I have an endpoint where I pass on certain inputs. It should always result in the same output. It should not give me that first time I have given it and it gives me, let me take an example here. So let's imagine that there is a mathematical function which says a plus b. So if I pass on into this function saying that inputs are 2 and 3, it will always give me a output as a 5. On the other hand, if I have a function which says, give me the real-time temperature for a particular place. And let's imagine I pass on the Delhi as a parameter. So if I pass on Delhi as a parameter at 9 o'clock in the morning, it will give me, let's say, X temperature. And then in the afternoon, if I pass on the same parameter and then say, okay, give me a temperature, then it will give me a Y temperature. So the output is varying. So idempotency is all about ensuring that their output is not varied when you're passing the same parameter.
Very well explained.
May I add something? Because I think the point is to explain why this is important. So I think this explanation is definitely is very good. But the reason why you want this to happen is, for example, to avoid duplicates. For example, if you are generating a lead and you send 2 requests by mistake, you don't want 2 leads in Salesforce, you want only 1. And that's why you apply something like idempotency. You want to minimize dirty data, essentially. That's why it is important.
Yeah, great point. I think there were a couple of other questions also, which I think were a little bit too specific, so I didn't really ask them. And if people have questions, please feel free to unmute and yeah, ask. I think that is better because the questions we had earlier were very, very technical and very use case specific. Atul, you have a question?
Yeah, Gaurav, thanks. Nitin, so I'm struggling with completing the scenario in the time. So do you have any specific And this is at this point specifically for 602 charter scenarios. So do you have a specific tips, to improve the time?
Nitin, go with it.
Okay, I mean, time management is a topic which I can assure you, although everybody has struggled and then everybody has overcome it, but in their own ways. So for 602, for instance, when I was attempting it, I made it a point that I'm going to solve a particular statement at its merit. So if I'm not able to solve it, I will have some pointers, some kind of a annotation, which I can quickly search and then go back and then solve it when I have more information about that particular requirement. And in my view, CTA 602 versus CTA board is two different ballpark games. CTA 602 is more like speed-based. Again, big disclaimer, it's my subjective views. It's a speed-based game, and you need a different strategy in comparison to when you go for your 3 hours. 3 hours is more like your persistence, your patience. There are other things which get tested there. So with the 602, my advice will be try to be as fast as possible. Don't overcomplicate your life by taking wrong assumptions. So as far as you simplify requirements using assumptions, you can actually do it in time.
Okay. Gianluca,
Thank you.
you want to add something?
I let Nitin reply first because I know this is a very it's a very relevant topic for him. He also has a presentation, but he didn't public expose it yet publicly.
I will do it on some forum.
That would be interesting. That would be very nice. Maybe the most important recommendation I can give is this: practice a lot, and try very different styles. Something that helped me was I was listening to a lot of candidates and a lot of architects. They all had very different methodology. They all approached it differently. There was guys that were drafting everything by hand. Some other people were actually doing everything on PowerPoint, and that's fine. The fact is every hand is physically different. So every hand will be faster in some things and slower in others. And there is no one that can tell you exactly what are the things that optimize the time for you, yourself. So try a lot with many different styles until you see something that is really good fit for yourself. And that will be the only way to understand how to cut time, in my opinion. Of course, there are many tricks, listen to all of them. But then the most important thing I want to stress out is try, practice, and until you feel confident that you find something that works for you. Because everyone will have something that works only for himself or herself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no one size fits all approach. All of us have our different tips and tricks. So there's a question from Mangesh specifically for Nitin. How much did being a ex-business analyst help you in clearing CTA?
Good question. I mean, so it's not about ex-business analyst. I mean, if you look at it, when you talk about a CTA, in my view, you need to actually have a lot of I mean, you can borrow the skills from different areas. For instance, the enterprise pattern. I borrowed it based on my conversation with an enterprise architect, where he suggested that, okay, why don't you do this and then lay down some principles for yourself for the design. So similarly, like from a BA side, getting the context about the case study was never a problem for me. The problem was always to understand what I can fit in Salesforce, or what can be realistically fit in. and the BA side helped me in getting into the details. For instance, I have gone into understanding the roots of how certificates actually works, because I couldn't understand how MTLS or TLS is working, or for instance, the SSO is being set up. So I have to literally go back and use my analysis to go into and then see, okay, hey, how certificates works, what those certificates actually means, how they are generated. So it took me some time to read these materials, but the business analysis skills helped me identifying those problems. And then the other piece is, for instance, as a BA, I used to organize a lot of workshops. So it helped me organizing my own CTA plan. Okay, when I'm going to study what, how I can set expectations with my projects, my family members. Kind of, I mean, when you work as a BA, I can assure you, you do a lot of expectation setting with the clients, what is possible, what is not possible, and so on. So those skills actually help me in organizing myself better.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a very generic question from Anish. What are the general expectations from a CTA? And then we'll go to Jayant next.
So if I may start.
Now that you're a CTA, what is it that your company or that your project teams expect from you?
Well, the team has very very high expectations, and the customers as well. Honestly, yes, it's true. But I want to say we are not encyclopedias. It's not like we are. Well, maybe there are expectations that we know everything. That is not true too. That is not true. And I think what we can provide is for sure commitment, because we prove that we are committed, studying a lot, in getting involved extremely deeply in difficult things. So that is one of the things that we can do. And another thing we can do is the mindset. And the mindset of an architect is the mindset of somebody that will try to understand a problem or risk before it happens, to try to minimize the cost for the customer, maximize the return on investment. And it will also try to look into new technologies and do POCs and see what works and what only works on paper, not in practice. So I said before that an architect is an advisor. I think that is the most important thing. I think if you don't understand that technical architects are supposed to be advisors, you don't understand the role. You're thinking of the role as some sort of super guru of development and technical things, but that's not what the role is at all.
Yep. Nitin, you want to add something? Great expectations.
So let's understand what is a CTA basically. I mean, what that tags gives you. I'll quote here the I'll quote the Spider-Man dialogue here, which says, with power comes the great responsibilities. So with this tag, this statement holds true, because now you're not speaking for yourself or your view. You're actually speaking for a tag now, which holds power, because people trust it. Because people trust it because you have gone through a certain process and then you have understood that process. So in my understanding, the expectation is when you speak as a CTA, you are not bluffing, you're not presenting your views, you're basically thinking and presenting something which has a solid foundation behind it. So if I'm saying that, hey, there's a security risk if you implement this app exchange package, you have a thought process. Why do you feel this is an app exchange package is a security flaw? For instance, I was evaluating a Salesforce App Exchange package a few days back, and then when we looked closely into it, what they were doing is they were actually passing as a part of the package the session ID from Salesforce into their backend, and then using this session ID to log into Salesforce for XYZ processes. And my understanding was this is not right practice. I mean, I cannot just pick up a session ID from browser and then pass it back, which is literally giving full access to the backend of this application. So you need, the expectation is when you're speaking, you have a reasoning behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jayant, you've been waiting for a while, so can you unmute yourself and ask?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So my question is to Nitin. Just we look at the design principle, and my question is, where do you look at the approach of using of frameworks in Salesforce design and architecture? Right. So we see a lot of frameworks like trigger factory frameworks, exception handling frameworks. That's one. And second part is how much importance we should give for the Apex design patterns as well, and how much weightage we should give in our CTA review board to talk about this pointers.
Okay, I'll say Gianluca, although I think okay, I need to collect my thoughts on this topic. So if you look at the design principles, and then you talked about the trigger framework and other things, right? So design principles is, in my view, is more around a high level design. And when you talk about the frameworks like trigger framework and other things, these are the implementation of these designs. So when I say separation of concerns, for instance, so separation of concerns is a design principle. Now, how you going to implement this design principle is through your enterprise architect patterns. For instance, you have those patterns which says, okay, I need to have a service class versus I need to have a trigger framework. So that's how I see it. As far as the use case of these or use of these in the CTA board is concerned, yes, you do code them. For instance, you have to talk about your trigger frameworks in your data migration slides, in my view, because you have to always say that, okay, I'm going to have some bypass logic. If you say that, yes, the bypass logic is developed by Salesforce developers, you're using the trigger automation frameworks, that gives authenticity when you're presenting it. That's my take. Gianluca, you want to contribute?
Yeah. Gianluca, you want to say something?
I think Nitin nailed it. The difference between a design principle and an implementation of the design principle is exactly the difference that matters here. And for trigger frameworks, there are some design principles that are more relevant than others. And let me think. Bypassing the automations is one of the most important parts. In fact, in practice, at every project, we have those. It's very practical also. And if I think of trigger frameworks, I think control of the order of the flow. That's another principle, design principle that you may want a trigger framework for. But then again, the trigger framework is just a way to achieve that. The design principle and what you want to achieve is a goal. The design principle is the way you want to, the high level way, the strategical way you want to achieve the goal. And then the trigger framework is the implementation. I think if you have this clear, then the rest will be much easier to understand.
I'll kind of extend on that question, and like big announcement from Dreamforce obviously was the well-architected framework. So is that something that would be your recommendation, that anyone appearing for the review board, they should be very familiar with it, or it doesn't really matter if you know it or not?
Or if I can reply, one of the things I did, I aligned my North Stars with that. Maybe I can share my screen if I wanted to show you, but just very quickly, just very high level. There was this slide where I just talk very quickly about North Stars, and then here I decided to not show this during the presentation, but those are exactly the Salesforce principles. They are perfect North Stars. You can use them exactly for that reason, and it's amazing. And I didn't have this when I did my review board, because if I did, it would be much easier. My life would be much easier.
And any advice on how people should use these in the review board? Like any words of advice from you?
This would require an entire presentation. I'm happy to do that next year or something. But this is an immense topic, and I think Vinay Sahil is the person that taught me, and he's the best person to explain, in my opinion. But the way I used it is, I read the risks in the scenario, then I choose one North Star or two top, and then basically at that point, that is really the North Star. Everything I say, every solution architecture or design principle I choose is based on that. And I keep repeating, because by doing that, I'm doing sort of a storytelling. It's actually pure storytelling, but it's a very, very strategical level. While moments of truth are business level and are granular level, North Star is strategical and design oriented. And yeah, that is in short, my recommendation. But this requires a set of slides, and a presentation in itself is huge, is really huge.
This is a topic in itself, and we'll reach out to Vinay and hopefully do a full session around this. We still have 2 minutes left, so I can take one more question and then we'll start wrapping it up. Anyone else has a question? Okay, if there are no questions, then I'll just wrap it up. So we will be sharing the slides and recording. It goes on YouTube, the SAIMA page. We'll notify you via an email. And as mentioned, like, we'll keep you posted on when we are meeting next. And as mentioned earlier, again, like, we are very, very informal. This is a highly inclusive group. This is not an official group. So if you want to present, if you want to be a host, just reach out to us and we'll make it happen. And with that, I would like to thank Nitin, Gianluca. I think lot of good insights shared from you, and I think this was really great. So one last piece of advice, if you both have for everyone in the audience, one closing note.
I'll say,
Nitin, go.
yeah, so I'll say, I think Vinny used to tell me, the devil is there always in the details. So if you're on your CTA journey, please, the first thing is, you don't have to be always technical, but you always have to look into the details. Why, how, and don't think about the concept that, okay, hey, this is not a Salesforce concept. For instance, certificates is not a Salesforce concept which we deal with on day-to-day life. But if you look at it, it's a concept which is core to the security. If you understand certificates, you can actually easily explain complex flows like jot bearer token and probably MTLS. And once you understand that these flows, you can actually quickly apply them in your solutions for CTA or outside CTA.
Yep. One last piece of advice from you, Gianluca.
I'll be very quick, but first, Gaurav, Dan, Neha, and all the presenters, I want to thank you. This was my first SAIMA, so it was amazing. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Nitin, for being my wingman in this. My piece of advice in the journey to CTA specifically, because there is a difference between CTA and TA in the sense that they do the same, but they require different discussions. For CTAs, stay committed. If you are committed, it doesn't matter your background, you will find the resources now online. the communities, the study bodies, and you will be able to overcome the technical challenges that are very complex. They can be very complex, but you will be able to overcome all that and get certified. So stay committed. That's the most important piece of advice.
Absolutely. All right. So with that, we'll wrap it up. I'll let you all go back to your Saturdays, go back to your wives, to your husbands, boyfriends, girlfriends. For me, I need to put my kids to bed. So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in the next SAIMA session. Thank you so much.